Hello, friends and beautiful people of Global Acceleration of Ascension. It is Kathryn. Hello. I have something I kind of needed to share with you today, and I've got client calls and work the rest of the afternoon, so I wanted to make sure that I got this out while the energy was fresh and while the message is fresh, because it's really important. It's actually super important what I have to share with you right now. And I think for a lot of you listening who feel intuitively inclined to tune into this, this is really going to help you guys out a lot. So I'm going to keep this short and simple and sweet. What we engage in the 3D reality realm is a reality play, meaning everything down here that is in 3D reality matrix is impermanent. By its nature, it is impermanent. It is illusory based. It is not real. As pervasive and stubborn as the opposite of that may feel, none of this is real. It's all a play. It's all a giant play. And we either were selected to or volunteered to come here into this timeline at this time here to participate in this reality play here on planet Earth. And when we come into this reality play, this highly illusory realm, reality realm, which is 3D, we go through a veil of forgetting. And we forget that we are infinite beings, and we forget that everything that is part of this reality play in this reality realm of 3D is impermanent. And in fact, anything that is not aligned with the advancement of our soul's growth is by its nature impermanent. That chair you're sitting on, it's impermanent. And I use this example quite often because it has such a visceral impact when you think of it this way. But what is real and what we agree to in terms of the collective consciousness of humanity, what we agree to as real only exists as real because there's a tipping point of consciousness where most of us, instead of the few of us, believe that something is real. And this is anything, like the chair you're sitting on. If tomorrow we all woke up and 80% of the human population stopped believing in the existence of chairs, that chair that you're sitting on or the chairs in your home, they would cease to exist. They would just dissipate. Because that's how humans create the reality realm of 3D. It is a tipping point of mass consciousness. It is a push of funding energy towards some end. The belief that this structure exists, the belief that money exists or has the value that it does, the belief that your chair that you're sitting on exists, the belief in lack, the belief in scarcity or poverty. These are pervasive illusions in the 3D reality realm, but they are not real. They are illusory. And we spend our whole lives here chasing phantoms in that respect. Okay? So we're being invited to do several things as we close out not only this 2020 timeline, but as we close out a lot of pervasive continuums of reality that exist in the containers of timelines. As we close a lot of those things out, everything's going to be shoved up to the surface because that's the nature of collapsing timelines. That before something can completely dissipate and reach literally its crescendo or climax, like all the shit around it has to come up, meaning all the timelines that are tethered to it and ways of beings and structures and paradigms and belief systems and attitudes and opinions, etc., that are tied to that, it all has to rise up like the cream on top of a pail of milk. It all has to rise up before it can be scooped away, okay? So what we're seeing in this collective timeline of humanity that we're all participating in because we are all funding it, investing in it, in our energy, we're investing in a certain few pervasive things that have been a stubborn and persistent part of our reality, but they have been illusory nonetheless. Okay? They're not real, and they are impermanent. And the biggest takeaway from this call, if you take away nothing else that I say, please take away this: that anything that is not aligned with your soul and the advancement of your soul's growth in this lifetime, no matter how pervasive any countering reality might be to that, how stubborn a certain way of being might be in contradiction to that, it is not real. It is by its nature impermanent. Okay? So when we encounter, I want to give you a very concrete example because this is coming up a lot. And this is a big part of our reality timeline here in the United States right now, with the very polarizing and divisive election that we've just undergone. And please do not put any of your political comments here. This has nothing to do with that. I am talking about the bigger picture here. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole with you with anything that has to do with the ego partisanship of politics. We're not here to talk about that. Okay? So leave it out. I'm just going to delete your comment if you do. When you come across people who have their reality to them be so pervasive that they only tend to see things as black or white, I'm right, you're wrong, etc. Okay? When you are operating in that paradigm of, I feel then I have to counter that person with this argument or my point of view because in my experience I'm right, or I hold more wisdom with that or more experience or whatever. It doesn't matter if it comes from, a place of wanting to teach someone something or shine a light on something. You are still dabbling in the same finite source grid of energy that is created by structures of ego. Okay? And I know that this hits you square in the feels for some of you, and for some of you it might feel like a kick in the nards, pardon my French, but this is true. I don't care how heartfelt it is, the place that you're coming from, or from a genuine desire to want to do good or help this person out. It is still you engaging with a finite source grid that is created from structures of ego. And what do I mean by that? We are working with two source grids of energy all the time because the law of polarity, which is a natural, organic, universal law, the law of polarity states that anything that exists throughout the universe has an equal but opposite energy. Everything, okay? And we're playing with this big time down here, okay? We're playing with this universal law big time. And they're called universal laws because they affect everything and everyone at many different dimensional realms of consciousness, by the way, okay? And we think of, oh, well, once we get past 5D, there's no polarity or duality. You would be incorrect to think that because we're still working with, in the etheric plane, some level of duality in 5D. In 6D, we are working with, well, 4D for sure, because we're working with the astral plane. That's still a lot of fantasy. We haven't transcended polarity yet. Even in 5D, the etheric field, we haven't fully transcended polarity yet. Even in 6D, we're still working with the causal field, and we haven't fully transcended polarity there yet. It's only when we really start to get in 7D, 8D, 9D, and beyond, we start working with unity consciousness that is beyond and has transcended polarity and duality and contrast, okay? So when you're engaging in your everyday real life activities with those folks who have very rigid and static belief systems, attitudes, opinions, thought forms, etc., is it really worth it to engage at that level? Because here's what you're doing. Number one, you're probably not going to change their mind anyway. Let's just be honest, okay? Number two, what you are doing is maybe you think you're exploring something and you are exploring an opportunity to help someone out or be helpful in general. Sorry, there's a lot of light glare right now. Let me see if I can diminish that. But what you're really doing is engaging with something that's impermanent. You're engaging with thought forms that are impermanent because those thought forms end up being belief systems, and those belief systems end up becoming structures. They end up being the things, the mold, the clay that creates the formless into form. But at its essence, you're working with something that began its structure, its foundation from ego, from separation, from duality, from contrast. When you are working with that source grid, and maybe I mentioned, you remember that I mentioned a couple minutes ago, there are two source grids that we're working with. There's the finite source grid that is part of false light. It's part of false ascension. It is created by structures of ego. It may mimic or seem similar to a lot of the things that we talk about in the true organic ascension matrix, but it is not the same. And it is a closed and contracted grid of energy. I'll give you a good example. When you do step past your better judgment and start engaging with folks like that, okay? And I'm not talking about what anybody's opinions are here. It doesn't matter. That's incidental. What anyone's beliefs or opinions are, that is their perspective and vantage point of awareness. So how is that right or wrong? But in our perspective or vantage point of awareness, we want to either attack that or help them out, because our vantage point of awareness tells us something very different about the nature of our reality. And this is okay. But that doesn't mean that anybody is right or anybody is wrong. And it's only when we get sucked into that vacuum of that contrast, that polarity, that we're working with a very finite source grid, meaning it's a closed system. It is a vacuum. And you notice how when you engage with those folks, and maybe it can be a lighthearted disagreement or a full-on, knockdown, drag-out argument, doesn't really matter, by the way. What you're doing is you automatically feel that contraction, don't you? The second you engage at that level, or have someone retort back to you or parrot back something that you said to you with some sort of venom in their voice, you start to feel contracted, don't you? Or even when, trace it back just a little bit, and if you can be present in those moments, even when you feel that someone needs to be corrected, you start to feel that contraction, don't you? And there's a reason for that. It's because you are working with a closed vacuum point of consciousness. You are working with, not point of consciousness, but grid of consciousness. A sphere of influence, if you want to call it that, that is finite. However, if you were to take a step back and say, okay, what is my God choice? And this is what I talk about all the time in Timelines Expanded Masterclass. And this is how I operate in my daily life every day. What is the God choice in this situation? Meaning, what is aligned with my highest and best good, the highest and best good of all, and involves the least amount of resistance for all? That's the God choice. And if you can put that to yourself in all of your engagements, all of your interactions, all of your potential altercations that you might have with another individual, and you just give yourself a breath to ask yourself from that vantage point of self, which is your higher self, your God sovereign self level of perspective, you'll find you get a much different answer. And you'll find that instantly, instead of going to that contracted mode, you start going into that expanded mode. Because what you're working with at that point is an infinite source grid of energy. Meaning you are reaching beyond time and space to come up with a response from that higher God self vantage point of who you are. This is always going to yield a response and set off a cascade of trigger events that are involving the infinite source grid of consciousness. We are reaching beyond not only this 3D level of awareness, but beyond 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, 8D, 9D, 10D, up to 12D and beyond even. You open yourself up to that simply by taking a beat and asking yourself, okay, what is the God choice? What is the God choice here? And you will often find that it's not worth it to even engage. And I'm not inviting you to be passive. I'm not inviting you, I am a little bit inviting you to be passive, but passive in a way where you are doing that from the God self point of view, and not because you have an ego fear of confrontation, but because the passive way can be often the path of least resistance for something that has evolved out of an ego structure to begin with. Do you guys get what I'm saying? This is so unbelievably timely for me today. Thank you. You're welcome. And I kind of knew that because this kept nagging at me. And I have literally 7 minutes before I'm supposed to start my next client call. But I had to come on and share this with you. So what we are being invited to do and why this is so important right now is we are not being invited to explore opportunities for engaging others at this level of ego structure, but rather we are being invited to explore opportunities for expansion instead of opportunities for just engaging. Because if we're meeting someone somewhere where they're at, and it's involved in an ego level of structure, what are we really doing? We're feeding a paradigm that we're trying to close out. I'm sorry to be so yelly. I'm really yelly today. But this is so important. It keeps you engaging with what is instead of what could be. And what we're being invited to do as creative beings right now is to explore opportunities for what can be instead of trying to fix what's wrong in the existing structures that were created by ego. Does this make sense to you guys? Give me some hearts if this is getting you in the feels, okay? So when you are presented with these opportunities to say to yourself, what is the God choice here? Dig a little bit deeper, just a little bit, and say, if I'm engaging with this individual to try to correct or fix where they're wrong, how much is that energy just feeding into the old structures that we are actively trying to collapse? And where am I shooting myself in the energetic foot by doing this? And perhaps energetically in the foot of all humanity and collective consciousness at the same time. Thank you, David. Thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Ramina. Let go of anything impermanent that is not aligned with the advancement of your soul's journey. That's the crux of this, folks. That's the foundation of what I'm talking about here. Let go of where you're engaging with what is, or trying to fix what is, because that fully and sternly puts your focus and awareness on what is instead of what could be. And that is not what we're being invited by those keepers of the garden, our friends in higher realms who are really, really there trying to help us along here. They're in their own way. They keep nudging us and saying, no, you guys, you're still focusing on what is instead of what could be. This is not where your creativity and your imagination is in its best wheelhouse. Okay, you're confirming the contrast. Absolutely, David. You get what I'm saying. Let go of the contrast and duality that's keeping you in this place where you want to fix what is wrong because you're still engaging in the structures of black and white, right and wrong, and you stay in a fixed energy grid because you're engaging in structures created by ego. Does that make sense? There is so much more that I could say about this, but I invite you guys on your own to think about this is an opportunity for us to stabilize in chaos. That's why I created the title of this video as such. This is how we stabilize in chaos. Pull back from any altercation, any conversation, any interaction. I don't care how small or minuscule or unimportant it might seem. Do not overlook anything right now. Nothing is discounted. Nothing is diminished. The devil is in the details, folks. Okay? So is the angel. And you have an opportunity now to just dig a little bit deeper and say, you know, as part of your exploration of your soul's advancement, because that's where we're invited to focus and place our energy now. Where can I make the God choice? That which is aligned with my highest and best good, the highest and best good of all, and with the least amount of resistance for all involved. Okay? And also, where am I engaging in something that keeps me focused on the structures that were created by ego? The exact ones that we're trying to collapse. Okay? This is so vital to our turning point right now as we close out and are in this exit portal of 2020. This is exactly where we're being invited to have our energies. This is so important. And remember what I said about the pervasive illusory reality of our consciousness is held in place by the hive mind of the human family. And we can see where the hive mind of consciousness has gotten us into a lot of trouble before. Well, you can use that same mechanism that anchors reality to anchor a better reality than where we've been and what we've experienced. And it's only the tipping point of mass consciousness that allows us to create a new pervasive and stubborn reality that is good for all, that is aligned with the God choice, that does keep us hooked into an infinite source grid instead of a finite one, where all things are possible, all potentials can be played out, that are aligned for our highest and best good, and do allow us to walk those steps, work those stations of ascended consciousness. Okay? So I got to jump off. I got to get on a call right now, but I wanted to get this to you guys today because from my heart to yours, and my advancement on my soul journey is so invested with your advancement of your soul's journey. We are all tied to each other's soul journey advancement, okay? So if you're even with someone who's not aware of that, you know, that person that wants to argue with you or be right, they're still on a soul's journey. And you are hooked into that. You are invested in that. You can fund it with positive energy, or you can fund it with the old ego structures that created all the problems to begin with, right? So love and peace to you all. Bye-bye.